Hello, engineers. This is Splattercaster. Today we're going to take an in-depth look at how to create a picture-perfect tunnel through voxel material, with the added bonus of having a grid aligned to that tunnel. So in this case, the grid's going to be a rail. It'll be a 1x1 large grid armor rail that runs, roughly speaking, centered through this tunnel. And we'll be using voxel hands to accomplish this. So right off the bat, the prerequisite for that is you're going to either need to be in creative mode, or if you are in survival mode, you will need to have access to admin tools. So if you are not an administrator, say if you're playing on an online multiplayer server, this method is not going to work for you unless you can secure access to admin tools. And to do so, you press Alt F10 and you've got the admin screen here, and then you can select this Enable Creative Mode Tools. That is what is needed to unlock access to the voxel hands menu here. And these voxel tools are what we'll be using, specifically this one right here, the sphere. So our goals here are twofold. Firstly, we're going to place a jig that will help us align this grid to the tunnel, and then we'll actually be using voxel hands to create the tunnel. So let's get some armor going here real quick. So to begin with, we are going to create the jig. So I'm just doing this arbitrarily. We'll be creating GPS points that are also arbitrary. If you already have existing bases and grids and you're trying to do this, that's going to require a bit more finessing, because you'll need to basically place these blocks perfectly for where you want your tunnel, or place your tunnel perfectly according to where your blocks already exist. So that is a problem for you to solve, but this is just the general method for doing this. So now we're going to build an alt-azimuth style jig that will be rotating a projector so that we can align things perfectly. So here we've got two rotors, one spins side to side, one spins up and down, kind of creates an alt-azimuth mount. Now we'll be placing a projector. This will be projecting the rail, and this part's kind of important. We're going to need a gyroscope, and we're going to have that gyroscope on this axis of the upper rotor. So those should be in the same axis right there. That doesn't really strictly matter, but it does help with stability when we are going to go and try and align things here with this grid. So, and actually, as a matter of fact, let's take it one step further. Let's put the battery on this on the same axis, because I noticed right away there it started to rotate. So we're trying to cancel out as much rotation as possible and have this thing just operate nice and smoothly. So this is looking a bit better. So we're going to want GPS points now. So to do that, we're going to want a GPS point right here, basically at our starting point, which is this block space that I'm currently in. So there's going to be a camera here, but to begin with, we're going to start with any block that you can occupy with your character. In this case, I'm using the flight seat, because we'll be using that later. So you occupy this block, and then you place down a new GPS point. Let's get rid of this old one. So now, since I occupied that block, that GPS point is, in my understanding, in the dead center of this block right here. So if we look from all angles, that GPS point is perfectly centered. It's not centered on necessarily where your character is in that block. It's just centered in that block. So that's a handy feature right there. So now we've got our first GPS point. Now we can go ahead and place down this camera that we're going to be using. So we're going to need to be able to rotate and utilize this grid kind of as a ship, so to speak. So we'll be placing a flight seat up here or anywhere else. There's probably a better way to do this, I should say. But for now, this is the setup that we've got. So we've got alt-azimuth, we've got a projector, power, and a gyro to spin the thing, and we're able to look and aim it. So let's go ahead and configure this darn jig. To begin with, the rotors are going to be set to a torque value of roughly 300,000. So feel free to experiment with this. I'm sure there are better ways, but this is the way that has worked so far for me. The gyroscope is going to need to be set to a value of, let's say, 3%. It's going to need to be really low power or else it'll be spinning this thing like crazy. So, with those two settings set, let's now get the camera going. Camera, if we press the hotkey, we should now be able to move this jig side to side and up and down using our mouse. And that's what we're after. Now, the advantage of this camera is you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in, and that will allow us to kind of fine-tune where this projector is aiming. Now, this is not perfect, of course, as I've already said, but it's good enough. For me, at least. I mean, if you really need this absolutely dead on to within a meter, you can go ahead and spend all afternoon getting it right. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll just be making it good enough. So we've got our starting GPS point there. I'm going to go into spectator camera, and I'm going to place... Oh, wow, look at that. It's just raining right around me. I've got my own personal rain cloud. That's cute. Anyways, we'll place down an endpoint. Now, this is not aligned to gravity, of course. This is just randomly chosen here on the other side of the landmass. So, we'll place our endpoint here, Splattercaster 3, and let's go back to the start. Look at that, the rain cloud followed me. God, that's hilarious. So, let's go back to our jig here, and let's get this show on the road. So, you're going to need a blueprint of a really long 1x1 armor grid, which I already have prepared for us. So let's go to our projector here, and let's go to blueprints, and let's look for 1x1 by 6.1 kilometer light armor rail, or line, I guess it's called. That's what we're looking for. Okay, let's go to third person view here. Oh, it's centered in the wrong direction. So let's do pitch forward 90 degrees. Is that what we're looking for? No. Okay, so I placed my projector kind of wrong, but that's okay. So we'll just get it facing forward here, and that's all we really need. So now we'll go ahead and look through the camera, which is centered on that line, and we'll be trying our best to aim it at the endpoint GPS point. We're going to zoom way the heck in, and we're going to just try and get that as close as possible to center there. So that's looking pretty good. It's not perfect, but let's see if I can tweak it a little bit. It's pretty good. And we can go ahead and press F8 again, go into spectator mode, and see how good of a job we're doing here. So let's just slow down the camera a little bit so I can kind of zoom in here. So centering, we need to go up a bit. This is something I've actually noticed numerous times. This aiming thing is not entirely perfect, so let's bump this up a little bit. Okay. That's looking a little bit better. Let's keep trying here. I'm just cycling in and out of spectator camera here using F8 and F6. So let's keep bumping it up a bit here. So let's, whoops. You can see how finicky this part is. But we're trying to get it right centered on that GPS point as viewed from the other side. Okay, so we're getting there. We're getting there. Still isn't perfect. The side to side's good. I don't know why it's not aiming right. Maybe it's almost as if we're a single block off, but the error seems to be even a little bit more than that actually. So let's see here. We're doing pretty good. Let's get a little bit closer and we'll call it good. So all right, we're gonna just bring it just up a hair. Right at the top of my... Oh, man, I did too much. I think it was right above the letters in my name there. See how that looks. That's pretty darn close. It's not perfect, but we'll call it good enough for this demonstration. So now we've got this grid aligned between these two GPS points, pretty darn close. And when it comes time to build this rail, we can just weld this projection up. But for the time being, we need to remove voxel material. So that's where the next part comes in. So we've got our line aligned, already hard, and now we're going to use my method for creating a tunnel using voxel hands and doing it in a very precise fashion. So a little bit of backstory about the spectator camera, which is going to be integral to this method. If you use shift mouse wheel, you can speed up or slow down how fast you can traverse your spectator camera. So for here, I can press shift and scroll up, and suddenly I can move the spectator camera incredibly quickly. And conversely, if I do shift and scroll down, I can control the speed and bring it down to a very slow speed. That's the first setting. The second is using control, which affects how fast you can rotate the camera side to side and up and down. We're also going to be setting that to a very low setting here in a moment. So this is going to allow us to fine-tune and even lock in our camera into a specific spot so we can use voxel tools in basically a straight line along this axis. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually come in real close to that first GPS point, and we're going to try and between using control and using shift to slow down our spectator camera, we're going to try and get things lined up as nicely as possible between these two GPS points. So as you can see here, I'm trying to just align the first and the second GPS point. And one way to do this is to, instead of just going down, up, side to side using the controls, you can actually fly forward and then aim with your mouse a little bit to try and fine tune it. So here I'm aiming down. That's pretty darn fine-tuned, but we're going to have to do it even better than that. So we're going to get real close to this GPS point here, this first one. We're going to have it almost set to 0.0 basically by the time we're done. So there, we passed it. All right, let's call that good. So now we're going to aim at that further one, and I found I need to aim, let's see here, a little bit down. So just a little bit lower than you might think is centered, and I believe that's good. So now that your spectator camera is dead on between these 2 points, we're going to hold control and we're going to scroll down as much as possible on the mouse wheel. And we're just going to scroll, 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 and now the camera is functionally locked from side to side rotation. I'm moving my mouse in a circular fashion right now, and you can't really tell because the camera's locked. I can still move forward and backward, as you can see here, but I can't turn the camera much. And that is what we're after here, is to have this camera locked in position. And then, but still able to traverse along the axis of our projected grid line. So control mouse wheel down a whole bunch until the camera can't move, and we're going to pick a fairly slow speed to traverse the camera. So I'm going to go a little bit faster than that. So about this speed here is good. If you go too fast, it will the voxel material removal will not be able to keep up, and it will cause kind of some ridges and stuff in your tunnel, and that's not really what we're after. We're after a nice, perfect, clean-cut tunnel. So, onward to the voxel hands material removal. We're going to press 4 to bring out the sphere. We're going to make sure the options are set right, so we're going to press Control K, and that will bring up the voxel hands menu. We're going to disable snap to voxel grid. So that's disabled. Now this circular tool will be free floating, and it won't be snapping to the voxel grid and causing weird jitteriness as we go about this process. So we're going to pick a radius here. The radius is however big you want your tunnel to be. I've picked 25. It's a nice clean number. It means the entirety of the tunnel will be, 50 meters diameter, plenty of room for a grid to get through. If you have a much bigger grid passing through, you'll need to make this bigger. That's up to you. So I've gone with 25. So as you can see, our GPS points are lined up, and we're ready to start the process. Now I've disabled the camera rotating side to side for a very important reason. That's because you have to hold right click. And you might have a steadier hand than me, you probably do, but if you move side to side at all during this process, it will ruin your tunnel. So that's why we've locked our camera. So we're going to hold right click, and we're going to just pass through this entire landmass to get to the other side. Now I think we can go a little bit faster than that, so I'm going to hold shift, and we'll see if that's creating a clean enough tunnel. If you get some parts that aren't clean, you can back up and take care of them. So this part's going to be a little bit tedious, obviously. We've got a ways to go, but trust me, if you go nice and slow, the end result's going to look real good. Now we're watching for deviance between my crosshairs and that final GPS point. It's impossible to get it perfect in my experience, but what we're going for is good enough. And good enough to me is within 5 or maybe 10 meters of that actual endpoint. So to me, it's looking pretty good. I haven't seen either. Well, there it just started to move. As we get closer, you'll notice it's going to be slightly off. And you could go ahead and try and rotate a little bit, but it really just isn't worth it. With a 50-meter wide tunnel, as you can see here, we're within 2 meters of that endpoint GPS right there. That's good enough for me. You could spend all day long trying to get this absolutely dead on perfect. You could do a dry run by passing through the voxel material and spectator camera without deleting any material and see how well you line up. You could spend all day long getting this absolutely picture perfect. But for me, I think this is good enough. So we're going to re-enable our spectator camera here. I held down control and did mouse wheel up, so now I can turn my camera and give us a little bit more speed. And now you can see we've got a very nice, cleanly cut round tunnel through the length of this landmass. It's just about as close to perfect as you could hope for. So that's basically the goal right there. And now, of course, you can weld up this grid as you see. Whoop! Don't want to do that. As you see fit, you know, start welding. Of course, I have to delete this camera in order to do so. This is where everything comes crashing down. Watch, but yeah. So that's the goal right there. So once this whole thing's welded up, you can, you know, build your grids around it or connect it to your existing grid however you see fit. You might even need to leave this jig if it does not perfectly align to the grid you already have there. Maybe you want to do this first before you build your base so that the base is part of this grid and is able to transmit power through it or whatever. Although I think these rotors will be transmitting power through it anyways, so that's all well and good. But that's all for today. That is how to create a nice picture perfect tunnel with a grid running through it. If you've got any tips or suggestions on how to improve this process, by all means, please let me know. This has taken me a little bit of time to actually figure this method out reliably enough to present it to you all. So thanks for watching. I hope you have a nice day.